I'm sure you've noticed the American Pearl as part of the cool Kentucky exhibit up there. It is easily one of the 3 most talked about things here in the museum each and every day. People come in and they're like, oh my gosh, what is that? Not only did Tori build it, notice it's kind of cocked sideways like that. You know why that is? It's not so you can look at it, which it does give you a great view of it, but it's so we could get it through the door. No lie. And we were like talking to different firms. How are we going to get it through the door? How are we going to get it through the floor? And Tori's like, oh, I got it. She engineered it. So it fit like this much on each side. So just another example of what an outstanding mind she is to go along with this outstanding spirit. I am thrilled to be joined by my good friend, Rachel Platt. We had a history in TV together. Now we have a running program here at the Fraser History Museum. She is our Director of Community Engagement. And when she was in TV at WHAS, she was actually there. Yeah, she's here.
I'm in there somewhere.
She's somewhere there. Followed Tori to Guadalupe when she finished her second and successful attempt to row across the Atlantic Ocean.
Now let's set the record straight. I flew. Tori rowed. I know my limits. And this was the scene as Tori was coming up, just so everybody knows. Mac, do you see yourself in there? Okay, we were trying to figure this out. This is Guadalupe. So this is as Tori right here is rowing in, and this is the media greeting her on that day when she came in, just so everybody knows. And I think Andy already said it, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knows as well. She built the boat, right? I mean, everybody knows that in here. She wanted to know every inch of it when she rowed it. If something went wrong, she wanted to be able to troubleshoot. A couple of housekeeping things before we start, important things. The bar, just so you know, will be open until 7 o'clock. Once we move into the theater for music, no drinks allowed in there, and then we do ask you to keep your mask on at all time once we moved into the theater. You'll notice for a snack tonight, we spared no expense goldfish. We thought that would fit the theme of the ocean with Tori. I don't think she had goldfish after reading her book. That's not one of the things she had on the boat.
Rachel came to me and said, can we get this approved in the budget? And I said, I think we can manage the goldfish.
We can do that. We can do that. And then we're going to do that. And I want to let you know, we're going to bring Dawn out in a few minutes to talk about her connection to Tori, how she learned about Tori as a young woman growing up in Louisville, and then how the program came to be with Roe. And it all goes, that album, to Tori's first attempt, that failed attempt in 1998 with Hurricane Danielle. I hate to use the word failed, but I'm only going to tonight because it had such a profound impact on Tori, and it says a lot about how she came back and what she dealt with. So that is the reason why I am using that.
I want to thank Fifth Third, our sponsor for the event. Adam Hall is here tonight. Thank you, Adam, for the sponsorship of this great program. They're so smart, they figured out when they put their name on that boat back in 1998 that this may pay dividends for years and years and years ahead. You'll notice that they actually sponsored this back then, and we are thrilled to have you on board and supporting much of our programming here at the Fraser. Obviously, Roe is more than just an album. Dawn would also collaborate on the musical Roe that premiered this past summer in Williamstown at the Theater Festival. How many of you have seen that? Okay, pretty good representation of folks that have seen that. They experienced it together, Dawn and Tori. All that coming up, but first, our pearl in the storm, our first independent spirit, Tori Murden McClure.
Yes. Well, that's a great way to start, isn't it? So my first question before we have a couple of special guest speakers who wanted to say a couple of words tonight, I guess, is, are you ready for this?
No.
You said to me you
I'm
were
surprisingly
nervous.
terrified. Yeah.
Rachel does that to me too.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're used to each other.
Yeah.
It's not me.
Yeah.
So why is that, do you think?
Well, Dawn Landis and Danny Goldstein have put in so much work on this musical that I really want to live up to their efforts. And it's a magnificent thing that they've done, and it's such a gift to me. Yeah.
We're going to get a feel for that. But before we get to all of that, we have two special guests tonight who wanted to say something about Tori. I'm just going to say it. Several of us in this room have girl crushes on Tori. I know I am one of them. I say that to her all the time. And I think I can safely say, so does U of L's president, Dr. Neeli Bendapudi. We're going to get you up here in just a second. Tori's resume includes a law degree from U of L. Dr. Bendapudi has wanted to be part of this program for several months. I got word of that many, many weeks ago. She's going to tell us why. I am thrilled that she kept this on her schedule tonight. I know the last week has been topsy-turvy. We wish her well at Penn State, and I would also like to thank her for her service and everything she did in her tenure at U of L. And I know that, go ahead, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And Tori, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you had a couple of things that you wanted to say before Dr. Bendapudi gets up and speaks.
I was supposed to be quiet before you got up, but I can't. So when I went up to see Roe this summer, I spent 10 days away from Spalding. It had been a good 8 years since I'd been away from the university for that long. And my last night in Williamstown, I had dinner with two friends. And Steve Hart, who has a real knack for speaking truth, said, "I've never seen you relaxed." He didn't say, "I've never seen you this relaxed," or "I've never seen you sort of relaxed." He said, "I've never seen you relax." And I said, "It's the first time in over a decade that I've taken off the mantle of the presidency of Spalding University." And so I don't know what it's like to lead U of L, but I know how hard it is to carry a university at this time. And as I was driving the 1,000 miles home, I cried a good 500 of those miles thinking about the heavy weight I would have to pick up when I got home. So I just want to say thank you for the 3 years you've given us. It has been a privilege to know you. I love you. I will be sorry to lose you, but what great fun she's been. And a funny story to get myself back together. And there are a lot of Spalding teammates here, and they're going, "Tori, please don't tell these stories." I was doing commencement at Spalding about a year ago, and I had my very first hot flash. And they're going, "Please, no." And when I was driving home, I thought, who can I tell? Neeli. I called Neeli. "Neeli, what are you doing?" "Neeli, I got to come over and tell you this thing. It was in the middle of commencement." So there we are.
And on that note, Dr. Bendapudi, if we can have you come up here at the podium, or you can stand right there, whatever you prefer.
I love you. Tori, I love you. That's the first thing to say. So I was trying to say, what is it I could tell you about Tori? You don't need to know she's a chaplain, because she was a chaplain, because she still carries this out. I figured I just Google what comes up when you say requirements for a chaplain. So seriously, that's great research. It just said, here's what it says. Someone who can listen to your worries, your fears, your hopes, provide comfort, counseling, and guidance, spiritual guidance. And you know what? She really does that for me. She truly has. And so it's no surprise. Then I thought, well, that sounded pretty accurate for someone who's been a chaplain. Let me just type in characteristics of an adventurer and see what comes up. And here's what it says. Someone who has an open mind, approaching life, new experiences, and people with grounded warmth, and that they have an ability to stay in the moment. And I think that is so true for Tori. Now, we talked about girl crushes. I'm the biggest fangirl of Tori. Anybody who has met me in any situation knows that if her name comes up, I gush, and it's from the heart. It's no wonder she's a superhero, but I don't know how many of you know that she beats out any superhero because she can actually make her own cape. I know that. I know that because she made me one.
I made her a cape.
And she does so for all of her colleagues as well. She's a friend to me. That's something that as long as I live, I build relationships for life. This is a woman that I know will be a friend forever. You know this is a friend because the greatest joy of my life when I became a grandmother, people were sending me congrats, and Tori sends me a picture
of a crib cradle that she made when she made the pearl that has been passed down to your granddaughter and others. And she says, would Arjun like this? I said, would we like this? Yes. So my little grandson enjoys it, and everybody laughs because I think it is so beautiful. It is actually in my living room. It truly is, because I want everybody to come and see this. And when I was having a rough time last week, I just get this simple note from Tori with a little heart on it. And that's all. That's all you need to know that she's thinking of you and she's there for you. You can also know she's a true superhero because I've never seen anybody more committed to fighting for the underdog, to fight to do the right thing. So she is the word shiro, the kids use a lot. She truly is my shiro. So Tori, I cannot wait. I've listened to the musical multiple times, by the way, and I can't wait to enjoy it with all of you. Thank you.
Dr. Benepidu, you've been a blessing to the city and to the university, and thank you. We're sad to see you go, but we wish you nothing but the best at Penn State. All right, we didn't invite people from everywhere that Tori has a degree because that would take a really, really long time. For instance, we didn't reach out to Smith College, where she received her bachelor's degree and really learned to row, or to Harvard, where she received a Master of Divinity. But we do have a wonderful representative from Spalding, where, as you all know, Tori is currently the president. And let's not forget where she received her Master of Fine Arts in Writing degree. Our next guest is the key to that program. Say hello to Kathleen Driscoll, the chair of Spalding University's Noslin Mann Graduate School of Writing. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, hello everyone. First off, thanks to Fraser Museum for inviting me to talk a little bit about Tori, President Tori Murden McClure. It's always a pleasure to sing her praises. She's been an outstanding president for Spalding University for 10 or so years now, and I'm always filled daily with admiration for the way she steers our Spalding community with compassion and integrity and fiduciary care that's just unmatched now at any other private university in the country, I think. It's a pleasure, it's my own personal pleasure to serve on Spalding's faculty under her leadership. But, don't step on my line, Tori. Okay. Before Tori was my president, she was my student. And I have to admit, every time I get the opportunity to say this, it fills me with glee. It makes me so happy. As a member of our Spalding MFA in Writing Illuminati, which is what we call our alums, Tori and her literary accomplishments are a source of the greatest pride for the Noslin Mann Graduate School of Writing leaders, students, faculty, and her fellow alums. And of course, a teacher just loves all of her students, of course we do, but an experienced teacher knows how lucky she is when she's able to work with a truly extraordinary student, a genius. Tori is a genius. And in our case, she's a genius storyteller as well. And what a story Tori has had to tell for all of us, readers, this community, everyone. One of the great honors of my teaching career is that as an MFA student, a Master of Fine Arts in Writing student, Tori wrote A Pearl in the Storm, How I Found My Heart in the Middle of the Ocean. And it was, in fact, her MFA thesis, which we accepted and gave her the degree. We said, okay, I guess it's okay. Okay. It's no surprise to me, seriously, or any of the faculty, that the prestigious New York publishing house HarperCollins, one of the best-known publishers in the world, brought out Tori's book in 2009. Nor is it a surprise that this marvel, truly a marvel of a book, has gone on to win many readers and has been adopted as a common read across a number of colleges in the country. I can't imagine that any reader wouldn't be awed by the plot, of A Pearl in the Storm, which in the case of creative nonfiction, which is what she was writing, what her studies were in with us, stitches together an astonishing lived experience. But Tori's book is also a wonder in style and structure. It's a tale that's been rendered by such talented hands that Tori is someone I would call a writer's writer. Beyond those remarkable accomplishments, I have to say A Pearl is also a rollicking good read, and I hope many of you have read it already. It's filled with lessons for the living, really, really living, pushing the boundaries of what seems humanly impossible or possible. It's no wonder that Tori's book has inspired lots of readers to dream beyond what they ever thought was possible for their own lives. It's such an inspiration. It fills me as a teacher and a reader with more gratitude for this book than I can ever express. It's just a marvelous book. And now, a book these days will live for about a year, and then it sort of wanders off into obscurity, but this book has lived for more than 10 years, and in a mark of wonderful literature, live literature, it's been picked up and adapted into another form, and that is more support for my thesis that Tori is a writer's writer, that all writers are attracted to her work and what she has to say. So this is a book for our times, for all times, and I know it's going to have many different iterations, but boy, are we lucky to see and hear the iteration that it's been made into this evening. So congratulations, Tori.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. We appreciate it. All right, we're going to jump right in. We know about the successful row in 99, but we want to go back to 98 and that failed attempt. And again, I said I hate using that word, but it entailed a lot for you. It was haunting to you almost, what you considered a failure.
Yeah, and like many people, I think I learn more from my failures than I do from my successes. And I can't believe I'm starting with a criticism of Roe. It's the only criticism I have. They're sort of really struggled with the religious sensibilities of Roe, and particularly the most recent director that did the show in Williamstown was, kind of, why did you go to divinity school? And I had a priest friend who's a character in the musical named Joseph Curran, and he didn't personally believe this, but he recognized it in me, that I see sin as the gap between all that you're capable of doing and what you actually do. Now, Joe didn't actually agree with that as a definition, and all my failures are the gap between what I think I can do and what I actually do, and so I fail most days. And that sense of there's always more that can be done, and I know Neely shares this, there's always more that can be done, and so you're always feeling that gap. And Joe Curran talked about grace, which at that moment I interpreted as forgiveness, which is a very different thing, but I was a slow learner. And so here I am wrestling with Roe the musical and recognizing that I haven't been searching for forgiveness my whole life. I have been searching for grace my whole life. And of course, the universe messes with me, and the actor who played me this summer was named Grace.
Oh, wow.
Grace McLean, who is magnificent. And someone asked, what's it like having, watching your life in a musical? And someone observed, it must be like being stripped naked. And I was like, yes, it is like being stripped naked, only it turns out I'm in my mid-30s, I'm a redhead, I had a really great body and amazing talent.
Well, there is no fail. There's learn and learn and learn and learn and succeed, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about the little girl. And kind of what shaped you and how you became the successful woman that we're here having a program about. When you were early, there were some foundational things that kind of led you, and for some people, there are foundational things that break them, and for others, there are foundational things that sharpen the stone.
Yeah, and I grew up in the all-American dysfunctional family. Most of us did, and was the youngest of 3 children, and kind of went out into the world at age 3 or 4, and the world took care of me. And I've been very fortunate in the family that I have chosen, and many of those family members are here tonight, and folks who've taken care of me. Yeah.
We're going to show that little girl in just a second. One thing I did want to show, you sent me all of your clips of things, and in those moments that we talked about, when you really were saying goodbye, you didn't know if you were going to make it. We put together about a 2-minute clip, and I don't know if any of you all have seen it, but I want to show it to you, and then we'll talk about those moments and also you're wrestling with the EPIRB and not wanting to bring people into it. But just take a couple minutes to watch this. I mean, it's just gut-wrenching. What are you thinking as you watch that? Does it take?
You know, when I decided the height of the storm, I went out to get the distress beacon in that boat, and you know, the boat had capsized multiple times by that point, and it was doing end-over-end pitch poles, and I had not yet dislocated my shoulder. One capsize dislocated my shoulder, the next capsize put it back into place. This is my definition of a bad day. And but when I went out on deck to set off the EPIRB, waves were washing over the boat. It was doing, as I have said before, this really annoying submarine thing. And I realized I could not ask anybody else to come out into that storm to get me. So when I went back into the cabin, I knew that while many men had died rowing across the ocean, that the boat has always survived. So I had this sense that the camera was going to make it, even if I wasn't. And I was pretty sure at that point I was not going to make it. So I was saying goodbye. And I wanted people to chase their dreams. The alternative is boring. You know? There's a whole world full of people not chasing their dreams. And they're pretty grumpy and surly, and they don't make very good friends.
The The title of the program is Independent Spirit, as we take a look at a picture of you as a little girl.
That's what we were thinking.
Where did that spirit come from?
Yeah, the best of who I am comes from my brother Lamar, and the worst of who I am comes from my brother Lamar. And
here he is right here.
And there's Lamar. And so that little girl with the pith helmet was waiting to go to the beach with my grandfather. And he would tie a clothesline to that inner tube and that styrofoam ring. And I wasn't allowed out of the ring, but he would let me go out into the ocean. And there'd be dolphins leaping between me and whoever ended up holding the rope after a while. And eventually someone would want me to come in and they'd wheel me in and I'd be like, ah! You know? But Lamar is who I am, and Roe taught me something, the musical taught me something that I'd always sort of pushed to the background. My brother's intellectually disabled and he is also deaf. Our father is deaf and Lamar is deaf. It's a hereditary nerve deafness. And there are two different versions of how my brother came to be intellectually disabled. One was he was deprived of oxygen at birth, and then a story that my mother would share from time to time. She's always owned that she hit him with a ladder off of a bunk bed and broke his nose, and that he fell from the top of the bunk bed and hit the floor. But my earliest memory is of that, and that after he hit the floor, she kept beating him. And my mother could be pretty sadistic in her cruelty, and there were lots of reasons for it. As an adult, I can look back and say she was mentally ill and didn't get the help she needed. But as we talk in Kentucky about the epidemic of child abuse, it was sort of important for me to lean into that. Back to Roe and this musical, they cast Dawn and Danny Goldstein and Dawn Landis really wrestled with who to cast to play my brother Lamar. And they thought about getting a Down syndrome actor, but Lamar's not Down syndrome. And they cast an actor named John McGinty, who is deaf. And John sounded so much like Lamar, it made it clear to me that my brother had acquired language before that beating, and that his intellectual disabilities came from that beating. And there was nothing like sitting in the audience, sort of knowing in my core that that's what happened. And Lamar, even himself, he can't say, my brother, when he fell, he cracked a terrazzo floor with his head. And he can't say terrazzo, he'd say, I broke concrete floor with my head. And then he laughs, because that's how my mother would tell the story. And a few days after Roe closed, actually the day after Roe closed, I flew to Florida to say goodbye to my mother, who was at that point just a few days away from dying. And because of the experience of this musical and because of the humanity of this musical, I was able to sit and hold my mother's hand and treat her like a human being and say goodbye. And so that sense of that kid was always at war with the world, always wanting to make it safe, always wanting to make it fair. And I still struggle with that, because we can't make it safe and we can't make it fair, but we want to. We really want to.
I really appreciate your sharing that. I know it's one of those things, and we talked about it. I didn't know if you wanted to go there. That's entirely up to you. But it explains so much to me when I heard that. It seemed like, oh, I got a lot more about the why and the great protector of your brother.
And he comes here.
Yes, he does.
He shows up, and he's so proud. I've been here once when he came, and I was like, come on in, have at it. This place is yours.
That my sister's boat.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's so proud, and it's wonderful every time he does.
Yeah.
So we wanted to mention the name Lamar, and tell us, I had to see, so Eric Fee, and we're going to bring Don in here in just a second, but tell us about Eric Fee, because that was really a pivotal moment for you growing up in your book.
Right.
Tell us what Eric Fee meant.
So Kathleen Driscoll knows I kept writing a bad book over and over and over again, and it wasn't until I got into the MFA program at Spalding that the bad book started to become a better book. And there's no such thing as good writing, there's only good rewriting, and Kathleen made me rewrite it a lot. But one of the characters that was always in the book was Eric Fee, and he was one of the earliest people. We would have been about 12 years old when, and my father is gay, and my parents stayed together, but we always had to move every couple of years because he was a teacher, and someone would out him from the closet, and we'd have to pull up stakes and move again. So we were always the new kids on the block. And intellectual disabilities, and I was, younger than Lamar, so I always followed him through school, and they always started me in the special education class, and then, a couple weeks in would be like, I don't think this one belongs here. And then they'd move me out, but it was a new playground, new scene, and a kid was throwing rocks at my brother. Well, I was pretty adept at throwing them back. And this fight ensued, and two people came to rip us up, break up this fight. And one was Eric Fee, and Eric Fee asked the kid, why did you throw rocks at Lamar? And Eric took the little boy or young man over to Lamar and made him apologize. And then he called all the kids in the playground into a circle and said, no one picks on or messes with Lamar. If you do, I'm going to settle the score. And it was the first time anyone had said, not on my watch, not on my playground. And he was the smartest kid in our group. He was the best athlete. And I looked at him and I thought, I want to be smart. I want to be a good athlete. I want to be able to determine what the rules are on any playground. And so Eric was the one who taught me how to do that.
Does he know?
And he's a character in the musical, and he came to see it this summer.
Okay, so there is an ongoing.
And I hadn't seen Eric since we were about 14.
Wow.
And as we were waiting, Phoebe Wood was there, and as we were waiting to see Eric, no one could see, I couldn't see anything. I was like, where's Eric? Where's Eric? And then when I saw him, in my head, Eric is 6'6", with the body of a Greek god. And Eric in his late 50s is not 6'6". He's a little shorter than I am, and but he was still sweet.
What a heart.
Yeah, what a heart.
I mean, that, like you said, for the first time, somebody stood up
Yeah.
and said, no more
Yeah.
of this, which I think is incredible.
The power of a single act of kindness
Yeah.
that has just, it
Echo.
perpetuates
Just echo.
itself. It echoes over and over and over again. It's amazing. All right, let's talk about coming to Louisville and collegiate. How did that change you?
So you see these Converse All-Stars? I was in public schools my whole life until I moved to Kentucky to take care of my grandmother who had Alzheimer's. And the quid pro quo was I got to go to collegiate. And in my book, I confess that I think my guidance counselor in Pennsylvania cheated on my entrance exams to collegiate because I don't think I would have been able to get in on my own. But I arrived at collegiate, and I'd read the uniform code, and I put on my kilt as it came out of the box, hemmed several inches below the knee. And my white button-down shirt and my cardigan sweater buttoned 3 buttons up. There was nothing in the uniform code about shoes, so I wore those. And I was this 6-foot-tall billboard, this girl does not belong here. And I hadn't made it down my first hallway before the first classmate I met, Gracia Huntington, said, you don't know how to dress yourself. And it was, kind of uphill from there. And but fortunately, I was terrified that someone would discover, talk about imposter syndrome. I was terrified someone would discover I didn't belong there because I was so academically far behind my peers. And it was my high school history teacher, Helen Longley. After the first test, I got a please see me. It had a grade attached, but it was the part that really stuck out was please see me. And I went to see her, and she said, what happened? You seem quite bright. And I had only taken multiple choice and true-false tests throughout my life. I had never taken an essay exam. So so she sort of went over the test questions verbally, and I could answer all that stuff, but I didn't know you were supposed to write complete sentences. And she said, how are you doing on your term paper? I'm like, what is a term paper? and I could, I can almost relive that scene of knowing that she'd caught me, knowing she was going to send me home to an environment that wasn't all that great, and I was sort of babbling, and she put her hand on my arm, like, you be quiet, I have to do the math in my head to determine whether you're going to be worth my time. And ultimately she decided I was going to be worth her time, and she said, I'm not going to do the work for you. You have to do it, but I will meet you here before school. I will meet you after school. And she did almost every day, and she caught me up.
And she was there in Guadalupe.
And
I
she was
remember
there
her.
in Guadalupe.
She came, and
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, so
Yeah.
I knew how special. All right, we're going to just go through one more slide. So this is Smith College, and that's where you learned to row. And I love the story of who
Yeah.
came up to you. And
So it was Rita Benson, who had been at Smith since 1944, and this was about 1981. And she was the sorting hat of Smith College, for those of you who read Harry Potter. And I was walking through the athletic complex, and I knew I'd play basketball because I'd played basketball in college, and I'd never really even seen rowing. And Miss Benson planted herself in my path, and she said hello, and I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, she looked me up, she looked me down, she looked through me, and she said, you will row. And I said, yes, ma'am.
And so the rowing career began.
Yeah.
All right, let's bring out our second independent spirit, ladies and gentlemen, Don Landis. Welcome, it is so good to have you. We're going to talk about how your lives intersected, originally from Louisville. As a young woman, you read about Tori, her first and second attempt, and that was important for you to include both the first and second attempt. Why was that paramount?
For the musical row. Well, first of all, I have to thank you all for being here, and this is a real honor for me to be included, so thank you for having me.
Well, we're thrilled you're here.
But yes, so this musical would have never happened if Danny Goldstein hadn't approached me, who was my collaborator, who wrote the book. The book in a musical is the dialogue.
Yeah, look, I wrote the book.
She wrote the book.
I know, talk about these different books. It's a little
Exactly.
confusing.
So, anyway, so my collaborator, Danny Goldstein, approached me about working on a musical together. So anyway, I just wanted to set that straight.
And there he is right
Oh,
there.
there's Danny.
Yeah.
There's
So-
me and Danny and Tori at the premiere at Williamstown.
Well, let's go back to, you grew up in Louisville.
Yes.
And as a young woman, you were reading about Tori. So, because when we talked leading up to this, I mean, your relationship before you met her, I mean, and then when you met her, I mean, it has spanned like a decade or, right?
Yes, so I first read about Tori I must have been 1998, because I was at Ballard High School, and I remember that very clearly. And then I moved to New York City to go to college, and I joined the crew team, and had never rowed in my life. And I'm sure that some subliminal seed was planted in the pages of the Courier Journal, and out sprouted a rower. So, yeah, and then 10 years later, I read a friend, Danica Novgorodov, is here tonight, and passed me her memoir, her beautiful, beautiful memoir. And then I ran into Danny, and Danny said, do you want to write a musical? And I said, how about this? Just finished reading this, and yeah.
Well, it's like serendipity.
It
I
really-
mean, right?
yeah.
I mean, when you look at everything, so when you met with him, then he said, would you like to write it? Then he saw the book, he read the book, and then he said, I like this, and then how did it go from there? Because then you had to make a pitch to Tori.
Exactly, yes. So Danny is an experienced theater veteran. He's mostly known as a director. He directed the Godspell revival on Broadway. He's directed hundreds of straight plays and musicals, and this is my first foray into theater. So I was just, going by his lead, and he said, well, first thing first, we have to get the rights. So, well, first he cried on the subway when he read her book, and then he said, okay, let's go get the rights. So he wrote an outline, a one-page outline, and I wrote 2 songs, and my friend Brandon Cohn, I think he's also here tonight, got us a meeting through Mac with Tori in her office, and we came to Louisville. Danny had never been to Kentucky, let alone, he'd never been to Louisville, and he came and was very enchanted by the place, and yeah, and then I sang the songs, and
But
Tori
you went to her
cried.
office, right?
We went to her office.
And you, let's do Tori's mindset, right? Because she kind of shared this too, that when they said they were going to do a musical, what was your mindset?
So it probably dozens of folks have said, hey, we'd like to get the rights to do a film. And I've always been like, no, go away, get out of my office. And here are these two really earnest, lovely, gracious folks saying they wanted to do a musical. and I'm like, seriously, it's a musical about a woman alone in a rowboat. Like, this is going nowhere. And I wanted to explain to them, if you can spend 2.5 months in a rowboat, you are an introvert and you don't want anything to do with a musical. But then I did like the math in my head and thought the odds of this going anywhere are 0. And I may have even said that, and I was like, sure, you have my permission. I thought I would never see them again. And then they went and did it, and it's magnificent. Well, it has changed through iteration after iteration. The first time I saw it, I was wearing exactly what I'm wearing now. I wore this specifically. And it was charming, but it was nothing like the show that it is now. And I know they've got another gear or two to find if they get another chance at it. And as magnificent as Williamstown Theater Festival was, they had to do it outside because of COVID. They had so many really monumental things to overcome.
The actors couldn't be more than 6 feet apart. I mean, that's a big
That they never really found their groove. Now, I was blown away, but in terms of developing a musical, I think it didn't get a fair shake there.
Yeah. And Don, it was important to you and Danny not only that you tell this outside story, which is an incredible story, but really the why to the story, the inside story of what motivates someone to become this person. Tell me a little bit about that.
You tell me, I don't know the answer. There's
That's what we're all here to find out, right?
I feel like that's sort of the central question to the book and to the show is why.
But you pushed a little bit and
Oh,
said you really
definitely.
wanted to go places. You mentioned that to me in songs, and you said it was looking inside a whole lot.
Yeah, and they had the book to start off with, and the first time I saw the sort of a music stand version, it was at a place called Joe's Pub, which is a famous venue in New York, but it meant nothing to me. I thought it was like the Rudyard Kipling, and it's not. And after the show, I went down and saw Don and Danny. I said, you're going to be pressured to make changes to the story. Change it. And they looked horrified because they've been so true to the book and so true to me. And I know that Don Landis and Danny Goldstein would never do anything consciously to hurt me, and vice versa. And the folks who, the play has bumped into artistic directors and directors that have dragged it to places that aren't necessarily true to me or to Don and Danny, but it always gets pulled back. And that's why, and the actors change it. And there's a story I have to tell. I love Shakespeare. Love Shakespeare. And one of the things that planted that seed was an experience with Lamar. We went to see Shakespeare's Twelfth Night in Pittsburgh, and Leonard Nimoy was playing a lesser character called Malvolio. And he's trying, because he's Leonard Nimoy, they let him take liberties with Shakespeare. And it was a theater in the round, and he's trying to work out a letter. There's an M-O-A-I in a letter, but he's having the audience chant M-O-A-I, M-O-A-I in the round. And he sits down in the aisle next to Lamar, and he's going, mwah, 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 mwah. And Lamar goes, moo. And my parents are like, he doesn't belong to us. And Leonard Nimoy looks at Lamar and goes, moo? And Lamar goes, moo. And Leonard Nimoy has the whole audience shouting, moo, 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 moo. And it was, my parents wanted to die, but Lamar and I were soaring. And it was just it was the gift of theater. And I don't think I really had a sense of it until this summer of watching. The music is so powerful. I know the story. I know a lot of the words. I wrote a lot of the words. But the music takes you to places where my book could never take you, and the power of live actors embodying these parts was just something extraordinary.
Speaking of watching, that's the back of you. And I think Dawn's husband was in the middle, and then Dawn. And
Yep.
you all, I don't know if you consciously said, let's not sit side by side, or
Creighton, Dawn's husband, arranged that. Dawn was busy chatting, and Creighton sat down beside me. He goes, I could let Dawn sit next to you, but I'm afraid if she sits next to you, she's not going to see the show. She's only going to watch you. And I said, if Dawn sits next to me, I'm only going to watch Dawn and not the show. so Creighton sat between us, and he was a very active listener. So it was great.
so this is Grace.
That's Grace McClure.
That's great.
That's who plays you.
How do you, I mean, the
And I want to be clear, they would not let me build them a boat.
Yes, that's the boat.
This is supposed to be the
Yeah.
boat, but it worked great.
It
the
was in
weight
water, which was
of
wonderful.
casting this has to be enormous, for Tori and Lamar particularly.
Yeah, I'd never been a part of this process before, but and especially during COVID also, we watched all the actors performing from their kitchens, and reading with their roommates, and it was such a interesting.
At the end,
Experience.
Mandy Greenfield was the artistic director, and the last evening I said, "You got Mac right. I don't really care who plays me. Maybe I do a little bit, but if you hadn't gotten Mac right, I'd be really mad." She goes, "I kind of knew that." And they got a fantastic Shakespearean actor to play Mac. His name is Andy Grotlucian, and he sheltered in Kentucky during COVID, and he would go down and hang out at the general store to get a sense of who Mac is, and got Mac right. Yeah.
What was it like? What was your first reaction? Because you talked about driving home, you wanted to drive home alone from that to process everything.
Yeah, the first time I saw it, I was with Mac and Dawn, but I was so transfixed by Grace McLean's amazing performance that I could feel the salt water. I could feel the wind. I could feel the sting, and the shoulder that I had dislocated. There's a place where they're reliving the storm. My shoulder throbbed like somebody was kicking me. I was so there that I really couldn't see the show. I was busy reliving the experience. And the second time I saw it, I was with my rowing sisters, and I was sitting next to Luckett, and there's a song written by Dawn that really encapsulates a very deep, dark depression I had between the first row and the second row, where I kind of crawled into a hole and pulled the dirt in behind me and pushed everyone out of my life and tried to keep everyone away. And the song's called Drowning, and it's just magnificent in the just, it's not fun because you're going all the way to the basement. And my friend Luckett was sitting beside me, and she started to cry, and I put my arm around her, and then she started to sob. And then there's this telephone call that they flat made up, which pretty much happened, with Luckett trying to draw me out, and me, and it was just so true to what happened. And there were so many friends that felt like I cut them off in that period of time, and it wasn't that I was haughty, it was that I couldn't function. I would get up and go to work because I was desperately poor and needed money, but it's so well done.
One of our favorite stories to tell, I tell it, anybody who's leading a tour through cool Kentucky tells it, is Muhammad Ali's influence on the second trip. If you could share that, that would be wonderful.
So I worked for Jerry Abramson, who had to leave office because of a term limit, and I was asked if I wanted to work for Muhammad Ali, and it's right after the row. And I'd met Muhammad before because he had been through the mayor's office a number of times, but the first post-row meeting, we were at this sort of bowling alley of a table, and I was waiting for the important people to sit down, and when the music stopped, there was one chair left, and it was directly across the table from Muhammad Ali, and I sat down, and Muhammad stared at me, and I thought, do I have something? And he said, were there times out there you wondered, why am I here? I didn't ask why, because he understood that. Were there times out there you wondered, why am I here? And I said, Muhammad, were there times in the ring when you wondered, why am I here? And he just started to laugh. And in his laughter, we just felt this bond. And in the roughly year I was working for him, it was like every once in a while when he was in town, he'd come and pop me in the arm like, kid, you gotta get up, kid, you gotta get up. And I've said, he had a real soft spot for broken people. And I was broken in those days. And it was Muhammad who picked me up off the floor, and Mac, and my rowing sisters. And But Muhammad eventually, when he knew I was ready, said, you don't want to go through life as the woman who almost rowed across the ocean. So I went back.
All right, let's look at this. So when you got off the boat in Guadalupe, somebody found their heart in the middle of the ocean. Tell us how Mac came into the picture, because it was right about that time, right?
Right. And so I gave a speech to the downtown Rotary Club, and in walks this tall, handsome man wearing a nice tweed jacket and a pink Oxford cloth shirt, and blue jeans and green rubber garden clogs. And it was kind of love at first sight. And when Mayor Abramson had to leave office, I was still working for city government, and I needed a date to the mayor's inaugural ball for Mayor Armstrong. And so I was speaking again at the downtown Rotary Club, and I went up to Mac with this greatest pickup line ever. Look, I need a date for this thing. I am tired of dating testosterone and gorilla dust. I know you can carry on a conversation. Would you go with me to this thing?
How charming.
And we've been together ever since.
And so,
And when I stepped out of the boat, I literally stepped out of the boat into Mac's arms, and it feels like I've been there ever since.
right. And getting Mac right, was there pressure? Because apparently you picked up on the fact that you got to get that one right with the casting.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny, we've done a lot of readings of the show in 29-hour workshops where you work with the actors for a week and then you do a presentation at the end. So I've seen maybe 5 different Macs, 5 or 6 different Macs, and I definitely, Andy's Mac was my favorite. I mean,
Will Oldham's pretty good too.
oh, Will, yes.
Well, we're going to introduce those special guests in just a moment. One quick thing before we're going to unveil a picture here, and we're going to have everybody turn in the audience, and Andy's going to go take us through that. I did want to show one thing. I think Dr. Bendaputi had mentioned this as well.
Oh.
Tell us about this. So this is what you made for Dawn, and I wanted to show this because I'm like, oh my gosh. Tell us about this.
Well, you mentioned your cradle. Is it looked pretty similar? Yeah. Yes, it's so beautiful. It's and I just was asking my husband, like, what are we gonna do when the baby outgrows this cradle? Because I don't want to get rid of it. We have to fill it with something else, not another baby, but something else. Because it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. The inlays are gorgeous. It's just so pretty.
Yeah, we'll figure something out.
I just love that. All right, so we had this one thing that you ended up telling us about. I think Tori drove it back from your house, this picture that we're going to unveil as part of it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Dawn, let's go over
Okay,
here.
yeah.
Dawn, you're going to go with Andy.
We're going to tell this story a little bit. We're going to unveil this, which is going to be a new part of the permanent exhibit back here for people to see, and there will be a story that goes along with it. And then you'll have 5 minutes to get set and get into the theater, and we'll start the next part of the program.
If there's not enough space to have everybody get up and move over there, so Dawn, we're going to have you, and if you want to go, Tori,
Okay.
as well,
Come
to do
with
that
me,
official
Dawn.
part, and then everybody just kind of turn around, and then once they do this and we unveil that picture, we want you all to go take a look at it and then make your way into the theater, and then Dawn will introduce us to her band and special guests, and we're going to hear some of the music from Roe. So this picture, go ahead, Andy, and
Microphone number
we'll
2.
follow your lead over there.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna let Dawn set this up and then Tori weigh in, but this is again a new permanent part of the exhibit that has some pieces from the Roe.
Yeah. So this is a multimedia portrait of Tori and the American Pearl done by an artist named Wayne Brzezinka, who I discovered when I lived in Nashville, and I really love his work. I saw a portrait he did of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, and he uses objects from people's lives. So he used his shoelaces and photographs that were given to the artist by his family. And so I thought, wouldn't that be amazing to have a portrait of Tori and of the Pearl done I was looking for something for the album artwork. And so I asked Wayne if he'd do it, and he said yeah, and then he got in touch with Tori, and she graciously went up to her attic and put together a shoebox filled with wonderful things, which are in this piece. There are cassette tapes. You listen to cassette tapes on the row. A lot of books on tape, and Tina Turner, Dolly Parton, and Cher, but you'll find out about that later, cassette tape-wise. And what else do we have in here? There's pieces of your hat. There's the original Courier Journal article. That's the background. There are pieces of some of your clothes.
Some sunglasses I wore
sunglasses.
in Antarctica and across the ocean.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard that, Antarctica. She wore them to Antarctica and across the ocean. And they're still intact. You didn't break them?
Didn't break them.
Wow, amazing. And some pictures of her from Divinity School and a picture of her in Mac. Yeah. Is that little thing?
This is just the story that we're going to,
oh, wonderful.
that comes up.
So exciting. I've never unveiled a piece of art before. It's exciting.
There we go.
Ba-ba-ba-da! It's here! Okay. Thank you all.
Speaking of, our next program with Tori will be about Antarctica, I'm sure. If you'd like to take a 5-minute break, this is your opportunity. Don and our outstanding musicians are going to get set in the Brown-Forman Theater, which is on the other side of these screens you're looking at, and that will begin in about 5 minutes.
I've been to Timbuktu, scaled mountains in the rain. 100 miles I walked the Serengeti Plain. I sat with tribal healers and I learned my spirit name. High in the mountains of the Great Alaska Range, I felt a sense of awe, coming of age. I learned to mountaineer across Mount McKinley's glacial face. Some would say I'm lacking sense. In my defense, the unexamined life is not worth living. In my defense, to learn about survival and forgiving, I turn to the wilderness. In my defense, as you already know, I had to take my leave to join a South Pole expedition where I skied 750 miles in minus 40 degrees. The sheer audacity of this might make you smile. Harvard Divinity Field study in the wild. You can't fly a feather bed down Wisdom's lonely aisle. Hard lessons learned is recompense. In my defense, the unexamined life is not worth living. In my defense.
Lord knows I've seen a lot of things in my life, some good, some bad. My first kid, my first wife. Yes, I've weathered a storm or two, but I've never seen a thing like you. I've tried to be a good man on my own, worked hard, shared the yard with my own garden gnome. But what's a single guy to do? Till now I've never seen a thing like you. Oh, love, lift me up when I'm feeling down. Oh, love, pick me up when I get knocked down. Come on now, I hope it's better the second time around. Who knows the things she must have seen out there? So much time on your own can be hard to bear. She's so strong and brave and more.
Who owns the sea? Who owns the sky? Out here underneath the stars, we set our course and fly. Course we fly. Oh, Amelia, I'm back.
Thank you.